Now here's an obscure game that many DOS gamers have probably seen or even played at some point, but don't really know what it's called. Some people call this game V-Trek, some people call it VGA Trek, even though it doesn't use VGA graphics, but the true name of this game is Visual Star Trek, and it actually shares this name with an even older game produced for the CP/M operating system. There were actually a plethora of games made with this same style of gameplay, many of which operated in text mode, and perhaps I'll review one of those someday, but for now, this is the one we're focusing on, so let's get things rolling with the game stats. Visual Star Trek was created by persons unknown. Yeah, this game was actually released anonymously, and no one seems to really know who made it. And I came across one site that claimed someone by the name of John Saxton may have had something to do with it, but I found that person's website, and as far as I can tell, he may have had something to do with the CP/M game by the same name, but there's nothing on his site related to this particular DOS version at all. I even checked through the executable with a binary editor and I still couldn't come up with anything. Though based on the file dates, it's safe to assume that this game was released sometime around 1990. It's a one-player turn-based simulation game featuring EGA 640 by 350 16-color graphics and PC speaker sound. As for its current release date, this game was never actually completed, and was released in this incomplete beta state across many bulletin board systems and shareware collections, though I can't find it available anywhere online except abandonware websites, which is strange considering the free nature of this game. Well, I'm not about to link everyone to an abandonware website, but if you do an internet search for Visual Star Trek, you're bound to turn up several downloads of this game. Now, the objective of the game is very straightforward. The United Federation of Planets and the Klingon Empire are at war, and by taking command of the Starship Enterprise, you must eradicate or at least gain control over the Klingon presence in Federation territory in order to win the game. To help you fight back against the Empire, the Federation has installed an experimental death ray on your ship, and have also set up special experimental subspace radio beacons that can teleport the entire ship to the nearest starbase. Suffice to say, neither of these technologies are well tested, but considering the odds you're up against, every little thing will help. Before you actually start the game, you're given a screen where you can select various game options and choose your game type. The game type is represented as a grid indicating skill factors and the length of time you have to win the war. The longer or harder the game is, the more enemies you'll face. Also, on the higher difficulties, random chance is skewed against you, so that bad things will happen more often and good things will happen less often. You can also change the sound setting as well as adjust whether or not to play with black hole gravity, random supernovas, and tribbles. Black hole gravity affects how photon torpedoes work, random supernovas allow supernovas to happen completely at random, granted they're pretty rare occurrences, and tribbles, well, we'll talk about them later. There's also some other buttons like info, help, and restore, but they don't actually do anything. Again, this game was never completed. Once you get into the game, you're probably going to be a little intimidated by the many elements on the main game screen. The large grid in the top left is the star map, showing you the entire area of space you're allowed to travel in as a grid made up of 64 quadrants. The smaller grid in the top right shows you the contents of the quadrant you're in, as well as additional information about what ships and elements are left in this part of the galaxy, and 4 boxes on the side which have some special purposes we'll talk about later. Below this are your main starship controls and gauges. Everything in this little window can be clicked on to affect your ship in various ways. Finally, the bottom of the screen consists of your message window, which tells you when something happens, your agenda window, which shows you important things that are in progress, such as starbases under attack or life support failures, and your chronometer, which tells you what the stardate is, how many stardates are left, and how many Klingons are left in the galaxy. If time runs out and there's still Klingons left, then whether you win or not will be based on how many Klingon vessels you've been destroying on average per stardate. So yeah, at first glance, this game is really complex, but you're going to find that it's actually pretty easy to get into. The first thing you're going to want to do is go to Red Alert. Yes, seriously, there's no reason not to have Red Alert engaged in this game, so just power it up and leave it on. You may also want to engage automatic torpedo loading. This is accomplished by clicking on the black box at the bottom of your torpedo stock at the far right of your control gauges. If it's red, then automatic arming is activated. The next thing you're going to want to do is find some Klingons to blast apart, presuming you're not already under attack. To move around, simply right-click anywhere on the star map or anywhere on the quadrant map to move to that spot. Movement, however, takes various amounts of game time and energy. You can change your warp speed with the slider on the far left of your control gauges. Your default speed is warp 5, and you can adjust this to anywhere between 0 speed and warp 8 without any issues, but if you exceed warp 8, you run the risk of damaging the warp engines. The faster you go, the more energy you burn, but the less game time it takes to get from place to place. Left-clicking works the same way normally, but when torpedoes are armed, left-clicking will fire them in the quadrant display, though you can hold the button down to see where the torpedo will move before you actually commit to firing it. Once you've engaged some enemies, you have 3 avenues of attack: phasers, photon torpedoes, or the experimental death ray. Firing phasers is actually really easy. Just click on your energy gauge to select how much energy to fire through your phasers. The energy gauge turns purple to indicate the exact amount of energy necessary to destroy every hostile enemy in the sector, but will also go red to indicate that if you push that much energy into your phasers, you might damage them. In fact, it's usually a good idea not to completely destroy your enemies, but rather to only fire just a couple pixels less energy than is necessary to win. Doing this can cause enemies to retreat, which kinda sucks, but can also cause them to surrender, which can lead you to acquiring special devices, special information, and more. Now, I already said how the torpedoes work, but then we have the death ray, and it's activated by clicking on the lightning bolt symbol, but simply hovering the mouse over it will tell you the % chance that the death ray will even work properly given the current circumstances. Generally speaking, the more enemies you're fighting and the stronger those enemies are, the more likely the death ray will function perfectly. In fact, if the chance of success is extremely high, the death ray icon will turn red and flash to indicate that you'd be stupid not to fire it. No matter what, firing the death ray destroys all enemies in the sector, but unless you have a 100% success rate, you run the risk of damaging the death ray, taking casualties, and losing all of your current energy levels. Below your energy levels are your shield levels, and by clicking on either yellow arrow on the left side, you can transfer energy to and from your shields at will. The more energy you have in your shields, the less likely your ship's systems will take damage, and the less likely you'll suffer casualties, which are subtracted from your final score. Also keep in mind that if you run out of energy, your shields will be completely auto-dumped into your energy bank, so it's usually best to transfer shields to energy manually before actually burning the energy you intend to use. One big key to survival in this game is understanding all the various things you can do to interact with the galaxy around you. For starters, whenever you're next to a starbase, you can dock with it to regain your current energy levels based on the starbase's reserve energy. The same goes for docking at planets that have energy rings around them. Though planets will lose half their energy with each docking, and you're pretty much guaranteed to pick up a Tribble from them. Tribbles in this game start off harmless enough, but as time passes, their numbers increase exponentially, and eventually, if you leave them unchecked, they will start to interfere with your attempts to do just about anything. And if they get completely out of hand, they will multiply so much that the life support systems won't even be able to support all of them, and the entire crew will suffocate. Yeah, so the only way to get rid of Tribbles is to fight some Klingons and damage one just enough that they surrender, after which you'll transport the whole kit and caboodle into their engine room where there'll be no Tribble at all. Another big key to survival is mining. And every so often you'll come across a planet with a blue triangle on it. Well, these planets have dilithium, which can provide you with an additional source of energy. All you gotta do is get close to one and hit the mining button on your control console. Afterwards, you can convert the dilithium into energy anytime you want, though it's best to do this only under emergencies. And if you do it while docked with a starbase, the energy will go to the starbase instead, to replenish it if it's been damaged. However, on rare occasions, you may find a planet with a red triangle instead of a blue one. This represents flawed dilithium, which will cause severe damage if you attempt to refine it while you're not at a starbase. So I recommend you don't mine it, no matter how desperate you are. Actually, most of the buttons that adorn the top of your control console are redundant and are activated automatically as needed, with one exception. If you find a planet with a dry dock, you can repair your damage far faster than normal, even faster than at a starbase, but the docking button will automatically undock you. So what you need to do is orbit lock around the planet manually, transport or shuttle to the planet, then activate the docking mechanism. It's very handy if you've got some severe damage and you need to get it fixed ASAP. There's a few other things you can pick up as you go along. When a Klingon or a Romulan ship surrenders, they can give you cloaking sensors, which will help you find cloaked Romulans if you're aiming to clear the area of them too, or Tribble repellent, which will prevent all encounters with Tribbles for the rest of the game, which can be pretty handy if you obtain it early on. Also, Romulan ships specifically can provide you with a cloaking device. To activate the cloaking device, just make any move that ends with you being in a quadrant devoid of enemies. Once active, you can go anywhere you want without being fired upon, though Romulans can still spot you and will fire at you if they see you cloaked, thus revealing your presence. The Red Tholian ships are interesting though. They don't actually directly attack you and aren't considered hostile, but they drop webs everywhere which block you from moving. You can destroy the webs with torpedoes, and you can also burn the webs by destroying nearby stars. If you manage to damage a Tholian to the point where it surrenders, it'll give you a can of web lubricant so that you can pass straight through the webs with no difficulty. Since they're not considered hostile though, your phasers won't lock onto them. You may have also noticed the self-destruct trigger by now. If your situation is completely hopeless, then sometimes the only way to salvage your score is to blow up the Enterprise, taking out as many enemies as possible in the process. If you're looking to end the game with a promotion though, this isn't going to cut it. When the game's over, your total score is just one aspect of winning. You're also put up for promotion, and the only way to get promoted is to run a clean game, not waste any time, win the war, and most importantly, survive. Heck, if you did badly enough, you may even get demoted instead. There's just a couple things left really. And one of the overarching goals of the Klingons is to take over your starbases to convert them into super commander factories. The green super commander vessels are really powerful, so taking out any factories where they're being built should be a priority. Not to mention saving starbases from attack so that they don't get turned into one. Also, if you need to travel a long distance for whatever reason, instead of going there under your own power, you may opt to use a wormhole or black hole instead. The wormholes guarantee that you will arrive in a specific quadrant, while the black holes are completely random and will also screw with your current warp drive setting. Either way, to enter one of these holes, you have to plot a course that extends beyond the hole itself, but leads you straight through it. And yeah, that should get you started in playing visual Star Trek. It's a pretty engrossing game, and there's a surprising amount of stuff to do considering it's not 100% completed. It is a very technical game though, with all of its heavily streamlined control interfaces, and really, once you've beaten the game enough times, it all starts to feel the same. Still, if you enjoy turn-based games, or games that are entirely mouse-driven, or early examples of casual gaming, this game will certainly suffice. DOSBox settings are easy enough. You just need to set a fixed cycles count so that all of the special effects and things that can happen don't go by too fast. I recommend a setting of 5,000, but you can adjust this to your tastes, though I find anything higher than 10,000 is just simply way too fast. Anywho, that's all for this episode of Ancient DOS Games. Stay tuned for episode 69. Yeah, I'm not giving any hints this time either. The number itself should be more than enough to go on. So if you think you know which game's coming up, then send your guess to adg@pixelships.com and tune in next Saturday to see what I've got in store.